Another day, another gamble on a random Aliexpress computer. This time we've got a tiny gaming system that has a laptop i9 in it paired with a fully fledged desktop GTX 1650. So it's kind of like an Intel NUC that's been bulking up with horse steroids. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to check it out. But before we get into that, it's time for a word from today's video sponsor, Linode.
Today's video is sponsored by Linode, which is a fast, powerful, and affordable Linux-based web hosting platform. Linode is a great choice if you want to host a WordPress site, games server, file sharing server, or maybe even your own VPN. But more than that, they also have some beefy servers that you can use for computational loads. One of the main things that sets Linode apart, other than the fact that they don't want to become the overarching ruler of the universe, is the fact that they have some of the best customer support with 24/7 open phone lines. If this sounds good to you, use the link in my description below for a $100 free credit. Thank you very much Linode for sponsoring today's video. Now again, the box is surprisingly small. Here is my hand for scale. Also, it's good to see that Mr. Box Tape Man is still getting regular work. Although, it seems like his lines aren't quite as straight as they used to be, so it seems like he's getting a bit sloppy. Oh, gamer packaging. Which then smoothly pops open like that. In here we have the gaming PC. And then under here we have a whole bunch of accessories with that characteristic Shenzhen factory smell. Here's a big power brick, which I guess is one of the ways in which they can keep the device so small is by moving the power supply outside. This is what looks like maybe an SSD mounting bracket, and then you also have a tiny little SATA cable with a SATA power to what almost looks like a floppy power cable. So let's check out the little horse steroid abuser in here. Ooh. It's actually quite solid feeling. Oh, that's actually much better looking than I was expecting. You've got this metal plate that wraps around the chassis with some carbon fiber effect all over the place. Around the front, there's some more carbon fiber effect with a nice power button. So if RGB adds 15% to your gaming performance, how much does carbon fiber effect add? To the sides, we've got some ventilation, which actually worries me a bit. I don't think the temperatures in this thing's gonna be very good. In terms of rear I/O, it's actually much better than I was expecting. I like the addition of a display port and a full-sized Ethernet port. Okay, let's open it up and see what the cooling solution looks like in here, because it does seem a bit like it's gonna run hotter than midday on Mercury, but hopefully I'm wrong there. Okay, so there are some clips holding it in, which reminds me of the PS4 teardown I did in the last video. This looks entirely different to how I was expecting it to look. I kind of thought there was going to be like a normal GTX 1650 in here, because that was the impression that the photos on Aliexpress gave. Whereas this just looks like a MacGyvered laptop PCB with both the graphics card and the CPU on the same board. Although it does seem to have a decent heatsink here on the side with two fans over some fairly beefy looking copper heat pipes. Unfortunately, this does also fall victim to the curse of single channel, but you can get it in barebone format where you don't get any storage or RAM with it and you just populate it with your own. Now, I'm not going to take a peek under that cooler yet because I want to see what kind of temperatures we get while gaming with this stock thermal paste and if better thermal paste makes any kind of difference. Finally, this is the inside of the ventilation at the bottom of the computer, and it seems like it's responsible for most of the airflow to these two fans underneath it. And if you hold it over there, you can see that, yeah, we may have some BDSM fan choking action. Okay, let's switch it on. Wow, there's quite a lot of red glow going on there. this is a really standard Windows install. There's like no bloatware on here. And it's in English, which is so exciting. This is the first AliExpress PC that has had Windows in English on it. Okay, so here in Windows, doing just idle background tasks, it's boosting till about 4.2 gigahertz. And this is actually the Intel i9-9880H, which is an 8-core 16-thread CPU. That's like beast mode laptop CPU right there. And then in terms of GPU, we have the full fat GTX 1650. None of that loser Max Q business. Wait, I'm actually curious to see what kind of BIOS we have on this little PC. I might restart it and see what kind of power tuning options we have available for that thick i9.
Now I know for you normies out there, there's nothing particularly interesting about a computer's BIOS, but this little PC's BIOS is, as the kids would say, tight! Look at all that customizability. You can set the boost behavior based on core utilization, you can enhance the crap out of C states. I don't even know what that setting does. This tiny PC has a BIOS that'll make Der Bauer blush, which means I should probably do a follow-up video where I liquid cool it and see how far I can push that little i9.
Having just loaded into GTA 5, things are already starting to look a bit sketchy. We're hovering at about the mid-80s with the CPU, and that's because it's boosting quite aggressively. It sits at about 4.1 gigahertz, maybe a bit lower, but around there. Now, in terms of the graphics card temperatures, that's actually way better in the mid-50s, boosting to about 1830 megahertz, which, yeah, that's actually not too bad. When it comes to the frame rate, it's pretty decent for a 1650. I'm using 1080p high settings here, and yeah, it is very playable. You even get a little bit above 60 frames per second, which, you know, it feels nice. Now, after driving around for a bit, what seems to be happening here is that the CPU core frequency is slowly creeping down as the temperatures climb, although that shouldn't affect temperatures too much because it seems like the 1650 is where most of the bottleneck is at the moment. Battlefield 5 is actually surprisingly playable on this system. Here we're using 1080p medium settings with DirectX 12, and it's very usable for online gameplay, and yeah, you're not going to be held back too much by the system. I'm really impressed here. Fortnite also runs really well. I'm using 1080p competitive settings here, and it is very playable. It's reasonably stuttery every now and then, but I've been told that Fortnite servers are just quite stuttery at the moment, so that may be part of the problem there. But yeah, if you're a Fortnite gamer, this is a reasonable PC for that. You can even play Escape from Tarkov on this thing. It runs way better than I was expecting. Here I'm using the low preset at 1080p, and yeah, it's perfectly usable. Like, this is actually pretty impressive. Moving over to the map reserve, yeah, things aren't looking as rosy here. This kind of frame rate is unfortunately not really acceptable in Escape from Tarkov, especially considering how thin that line is between winning a gunfight and getting your ass wrecked, you noob.
Now, the gaming experience on this little PC is actually really good, aside from the jet turbine noise and the Dell temperatures. But I did sleep on the temperatures a bit, and I decided that, you know what, in the context of a laptop, for an 8-core 16-thread CPU running at about 4 gigahertz, that's not too bad. But I did decide to open it up after that gaming experience to have a closer look at the cooling solution and maybe repaste it to see if that makes any difference. And wow, that really is an amazing looking cooling solution. You've got these fat heat pipes and a whole bunch of copper. Although they didn't properly mount the CPU bit of the cooler, you can see that there's actually a screw missing, which is pretty typical Aliexpress in my experience. Removing that massive copper reveals a thermal paste application, which I cleaned off and replaced with Noctua NTH2. I also stole a screw from the fan mounting to replace the missing screw for the CPU cooler mounting. And after all of that, the gaming temperatures were immediately way worse. The CPU went straight back up to about 86 degrees Celsius, but the boost frequency was significantly lower and it kept creeping lower throughout the duration of the gameplay.
So I opened the PC straight back up, removed the cooler to see that I didn't really put enough thermal paste on, so I put way more on, remounted everything, screwed it down even tighter, and this time the temperatures were maybe a tiny bit better. Well, at least when it comes to the GTX 1650 temperatures. The main improvement came while idle on the desktop, because as you can hear here, the fans aren't spinning up like they used to, which I guess does make the system a lot quieter and more usable. In conclusion, I really like this little PC. I think it's really cool, and if you need a reasonable amount of power to stuff in a small hole somewhere, I think this is a great option. Now, Toasty Bros did do a video on it earlier this week where they recommended that you should go for the i7 variant instead, and I very much agree with that, because not only will it mean that you'll get lower temperatures and probably less noise from that cooling solution, but it's also cheaper to buy, and it's a better pairing for that GTX 1650, especially for gaming use cases. But yeah, with that, it brings me to the end of the video. Let me know in the comment section down below if you want me to do like a liquid cooled follow-up to this video. Also subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss that. And yeah, until the next video, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.